welcome back to Ladies Who Launch, sponsored by Volt Credit Union. If you're just now tuning in to us, we've just heard from best-selling author Nancy Allen. Our next segment is sponsored by Mercy. Entering her 55th year as a Sister of Mercy, she's had the privilege of spending over 15 years at Mercy Springfield Communities in many capacities, working with a variety of coworkers, and she delights in legacy and leadership development. I've had the opportunity of meeting our next presenter, and she is an absolute, genuine delight. Please give a warm, virtual welcome to Sister Richard Mary Burke.
Good afternoon to everyone. I am deeply humbled to be invited to represent our beloved Mercy Ministry among you today. And we're very thrilled to be a part of the evolving program, Ladies Who Launch. Today, for our reflection, which I will be offering to you, I would like to just put us in a different context. No matter what faith tradition we are, all of us are believers in the person of Jesus. One of Jesus's most faithful disciples was a woman by the name of Mcauley, and she was the woman who originally founded our religious community, whose name is also a part of the ministry. We are the Religious Sisters of Mercy. And as a beloved disciple of Jesus, as he taught, so did Catherine. And she taught us always in our community and ministries to always be sure to read the signs of your times. I gave some thought to that as I was coming to visit with you today, because you see, you, me, all of us, we are blessed women of our local communities, our families, and our nation. As women, we have been given many, many special gifts, but the one I'd like to focus on today is that we are given the capacity and the gift to nurture. Whenever we intend on nurturing another or nurturing a culture or a situation, it's important that we already know there's a certain purpose. What is our purpose in mind? I'd like to offer you a very simple tool that might be a means of support, encouragement, and affirmation for you as ladies who launch, that you can bring about new hope and spirit in your homes, your communities, and your businesses. That tool is the gift of faith. In faith, we have certain symbols. And one of those basic symbols, which we all share, is the symbol of a crucifix, no matter which faith tradition we are. There's a bodily figure which represents the person of Jesus, who had the capacity to model for us unconditional love and service. As a follower, our foundress, Mcauley, wanted to have something similar for our earliest sisters, and so she constructed this cross. And this cross is a cross within a cross. You will see this symbol many, many times, and she did not choose to use a bodily figure. The reason is because as we transitioned in the ministry, and we now have the Mercy Cross throughout all of our facilities and buildings, we don't have a bodily figure because, my friends, we are called to each be and represent the person of Jesus, to bring his heart, his mind, his loving hands, and his arms to embrace all those that we meet and to thereby give witness to our faith. Gracious and loving God, we ask you to bless each one of these sacred women gathered together here. And please give us the gift and the capacity to love with your love and to embrace with your light, with your arms and your spirit, all those with whom we encounter each day. May we all be ladies who launch, and who launch from the depths of our heart, our love and concern for our families, our many friends, and all those in our beloved communities. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen. And we'll pause now for a moment of quiet. As we close this portion, the next item on our agenda is a panel discussion about leading through a crisis, which are the current signs of our times. Our moderator for today is my dear friend Sonya Kullmann, who has seen plenty of both during her career in television news and now as Mercy's Media Relations and Communications Manager. Please help me welcome Sonya for our afternoon panel discussion. Thank you.
And thank you, Sister Richard Mary, for that wonderful introduction. She is such a blessing. Well, today I have the pleasure of introducing you to three incredible female leaders, Katie Towns, Krystal Simon, and Dr. Carol Taylor. Now, in case you're wondering out there on the virtual feed, we are abiding by the new ordinance. We are all wearing masks today, but we do have exceptions for eating and drinking, and then, of course, while speaking to an audience, when you are 6 feet apart. And trust me, they have measured this out. We are at least 6 feet apart. So first, let's start with Katie Towns, Assistant Director at the Springfield-Greene County Health Department. She will definitely keep us honest on that 6 feet distance there. After completing a Bachelor of Science in Sports Medicine, Athletic Training, and later a Master's of Public Health from Missouri State University, Katie has spent her career in healthcare-related fields in nonprofit, healthcare, and government. In her current role, she's worked toward enhancing systems and policies that improve community health, most recently related to improving mental health and reducing substance abuse. Katie is led by a vision to work across sectors to incorporate health as an element of developing Springfield's infrastructure and our culture. Katie's the mother of two beautiful children, Cole and Marin. Katie, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Next, let me introduce Krystal Simon. Krystal is the Chief Operations Officer at Barnabas Foundation, including Camp Barnabas and Barnabas Prep. Camp Barnabas is a unique ministry providing Christian experiences to more than 4,000 individuals with special needs and chronic illnesses, and their missionary volunteers every summer. Under Krystal's leadership in the last 4 years, Camp Barnabas has grown donations by 76%. Krystal is a mother to three amazing kids, Olivia, Sophia, and Will. Krystal, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce you all to Dr. Carol Taylor. Dr. Taylor is wrapping up her 45th year of service in the world of education, 25 years in public education, and the last 20 in Christian higher education. Now, her plan was to retire as president of Evangel University this summer, but those plans got disrupted by the arrival of COVID-19, and really what didn't get disrupted. Dr. Taylor's known for taking on challenging assignments like developing a public school system K-12 program for immigrant students, leading the launch of a new international testing program and the research and design for a major test redesign, leading academic programs, and stepping into turnaround situations. So Dr. Carol Taylor, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate all of you ladies. So let's go ahead, jump right in. Let's talk about the COVID-19 crisis and all the unique challenges it's brought to all of your businesses, organizations. And Katie, we're going to start with you. You have been front and center with the health department during all of this. So talk about some of those unique challenges.
So I think I'll start with what is not unique about this. This situation has evolved extremely rapidly, and I think if we were to fast forward and talk about this in a year from now, I would be very interested to sort of reflect and have many different answers, I'm sure. But I think one of the, besides the fact that we now have to learn how to wear makeup with a mask on, that is really becoming an issue for me. One of the things that has been so hard about this specific response is the unknown. We at our department have a lot of very talented people, and we have a lot of tools that we use on a regular basis to respond to disease all the time. And we do that sort of silently. You might not hear about a lot of the work that we do, and we kind of feel like that's a win. And so when this sort of became a rising issue, we very quickly became thrust to front and center and using the tools that we have always used, but we were sort of faced with not really knowing how this virus works and what was going to happen. A virus, in my mind, is sort of like raising a child. I mean, you can train it and you can sort of expect certain things, but then it does rogue things all of a sudden, and you just don't know where and when those things are going to occur. And so we're operating on a lot of good, sound evidence from past responses, historical things, but the challenge of the unknown is probably one of the biggest things, and I know everybody's experiencing that. So we are not immune. I feel like, have a lot of expertise, but we are still in the dark on a lot of things.
Doing the best you can in the situation.
Yes, always
obviously.
trying. Yes.
All right. Krystal, we're going to turn to you. What has it meant for your organization?
It's been absolutely incredible. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Camp Barnabas, we are a summer camp that primarily serves individuals with chronic illness and special needs. And so we run a really fast ship, so to speak. We operate 10 weeks out of the year. We start at the end of May, and we run to the beginning of August. During those 10 weeks, we will serve over 4,000 campers. We'll serve missionary volunteers, which are your high schoolers and middle schoolers, as well as around 175 summer staff. So you have a lot of people on property in a really quick turnaround. And so for us, when COVID hit, we had to make the incredibly difficult decision. And I'm going to try to say it without crying because it seems so raw. We ended up canceling camp for our campers. And so what does that mean for them? For our campers, a lot of them don't understand what it means to social distance. We also provide a lot of the care for them. So a lot of their hygiene needs we fulfill, whether that be bathing, taking care of them, going to the restroom, and then feeding them as well. So social distance really wasn't an option. In addition to social distancing, we have masks. We have a lot of children that have autism. Wearing a mask isn't going to work either. And so we knew going into this that the challenge was great, but fundamentally we believe our greatest responsibility is to keep everyone safe at camp. And so we chose not to operate for that reason. In addition to our camper population, we've been blessed to have around 175 medical volunteers, a lot of those coming from Mercy and Cox, that will volunteer a week to make camp possible. There are weeks that we have, the majority of our kids are in a wheelchair. They have a feeding tube, they have a trach, they have a catheter. And so our program does not exist without the medical community. And so we felt like it was not socially responsible for us to pull a frontline worker from the front line and say, hey, let's come and serve at Barnabas. As much as I can tell you with conviction that that was the right decision for our organization, it doesn't make it any less difficult. We had to send out a message to our campers, and for those of you that have children, they have the joy of doing many incredible things throughout the summer. For our campers, camp is the thing. It's the thing. And I knew that by communicating that message, I was taking away that one thing for them, and they're going to have to wait possibly a year, maybe even longer, for that to happen. For those of you that are parents, you can relate. We're dealing with a lot. Stress is high. And our camper families, this is the only time that they get a break. They don't get to take a vacation. They don't do date night. They don't get a respite. And I'm telling parents, you know what? It's going to be another year before you get that break. Amongst all of that, we also made the decision to change our financial model pretty significantly. So this crisis, to say the least, has been a challenge. But I can sit confidently before you and our board and say that we all believe that we made the right decision for us.
It was tough, but something that had to be done. Dr. Taylor?
Yeah.
You can relate.
I can relate. It's a hard season. So none of us knew back in February, March, how this was all going to play out, right? I was actually in California at a donor event, and when our team flew west, you know, we were mindful by the time we arrived at the event site, you know, there were cautions and things that were beginning to unfold. Less than a week later, we flew back. We flew through Denver, and suddenly the airport's half empty. Now, that was Monday. On Wednesday, we're having emergency meetings. It was the week before we started spring break. By Thursday, we had the cabinet we turned our cabinet meeting space into what we affectionately referred to as the war room. By Friday, we had notified all the students, when you go home for spring break, take your laptops, take your books, and we're gonna give you an extra week for spring break this year. You're gonna love it. But you need to be prepared. You might not come back to campus. Well, the reason we did that was because by that Friday, we already knew the likelihood that we would be saying we're going to go remote was very, very high. And we needed that week to figure out how we would deliver everything we do remotely. So that meant in a 2-week period, faculty got over 800 courses ready for delivery online or remotely using Zoom. We have made a huge investment in Zoom and Zoom meetings, but that also meant classes that typically you don't do remotely. You know, how do you do your senior recital via Zoom? How do you do labs and other things? But in 2 weeks, our faculty kind of rose to the challenge, and then you just began taking each thing one at a time. Okay, next, can they come back? Doesn't look like it. We're going to need a plan for students to vacate their dorms. At this point, we're sheltering in place. So we're going to have a sign up. We're going to say there's no rush. You can take a whole month for us to do this. And then the question now is how do we plan to reopen campus in the fall? And this is really complex. At first, so I meet every month with a group we call a University Planning Council. It's university leaders, faculty, staff from all areas across the campus. As we got started in this work to develop a safety plan, we realized this is a lot bigger than our University Planning Council. So we converted that group into a COVID-19 safety task force. We expanded it. We've actually had 75 people on different teams, and it's everything from not just your academic programs. How do you do residential life? How do you do athletics? How do your business offices operate? What happens in the cafeteria? What happens to all those other outside the classroom activities that you have? How are you going to do recruiting of new students? What about all those students that were planning to come with their parents and visit campus in the spring and make their final decision to come? I mean, every area that you can think of in terms of how a university functions and operates was part of this consideration and group. We're now releasing some of those plans. The final plan is over like 60 pages long. But we almost start every meeting with what has become our motto, blessed are the flexible, because almost on a daily basis, this evolves and changes. I've reminded our team of it was a quote from President Eisenhower that said as he was planning for battle during World War II, he said, really, plans are pretty useless, but planning is indispensable. So the notion that the plan we spent so much time developing last week just went out the window because things have changed, and now we're going to have plan C, D, E, F. I forget what number we're on. So there's a story that I've shared as often as well in our community. And it was by Stephen Covey. He's repeated the story numerous times. It comes from his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I still have the original. I'm so old. I actually have the original book that was published like in '89. But I've never forgotten this story because it's so applicable to when you're in times of crisis and you don't know if everything you did last week is still going to be the plan today. But it was the story of there were 2 battleships that were out at sea practicing maneuvers, and it was this really foggy night. And off in the distance was a light, and the ship is so the captain says, tell them change course 20 degrees starboard, because we're on a collision course to crash. And so the signal comes back, no, you change course 20 degrees. And the captain's going like, who does he think he is? So he says, I'm a captain, change course 20 degrees. The response comes back, I'm a seaman first class. I advise you to change course 20 degrees. A seaman telling a captain what to do? Tell him I'm a battleship, change course 20 degrees. The response comes back, I'm a lighthouse. Right? So guess who changed course, right? So we'd set our course, we're going there, we've got the right of way to be here. But there are times when you have new information, you say, good idea to change course 20 degrees. And so we're kind of living in that reality every day. We make our plans, and as we get new information, we'll change course, and blessed are the flexible, right?
I think we're all learning that, we all know what we can't do right now, right? It's, okay, well then what can we do? And that's really where the new ideas come in. I think it's pretty safe to say that COVID has been probably one of the biggest crises you guys have had to face in your careers, especially moving very quickly. So I know you each have guiding principles that have kind of helped you through that. So for us at Mercy, we always turn to our mission statement, and that is, as the Sisters of Mercy before us, we bring to life the healing ministry of Jesus through our compassionate care and exceptional service. So it's always about, how can I help someone else? And we know that if we're helping other people, we're doing the right thing, we're on the right course. So I would like to know, what is your guiding principle, or maybe a truth that you have focused on, a true north during this pandemic? And Dr. Taylor, we're going to go the other way. We're going to start with you. Tell us what has been a guiding principle for you. I think part of it is being flexible, right?
Yeah. You can't get so rigid, you'll just break and bend. So over the years, I've actually had several principles that I think apply whether you're in a crisis or just in more normal times. So for me, the first one is you've got to be all in. You've got to commit to the journey. So whenever I'm working to build a team, one of the questions I ask is, what's the biggest challenge you've ever faced? Because I want to know, if you're going to join this team, if the road gets rough, if you end up in a pandemic, that you're not going to run for the exit, right? You're going to be all in. So there's something about committing and realizing you really can't lead in a crisis if you've got one foot out the door. So you've got to be all in. The other is, I'm like, give me the facts. What are we facing? So this notion of you've got to confront reality, but sometimes reality is ugly and brutal, and you've got to find a way to confront reality with a hope. That there's hope on the other side of this. We're going to get through it. We may not know today how we're going to do it, but there has to be a hope that will kind of rally people to move forward. The other is, I have this, it actually came from when I was at Vanguard University, and in my inauguration, the person doing the, blah, 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 here it is, you're the president. I mean, it wasn't blah, 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 but it was very special. But he actually told a story about leading with a third-class ticket and stagecoach travel. And a few years later, one of our board members actually on eBay went out and found an authentic third-class stagecoach ticket. But the idea is we don't travel first class. If you're going to lead through a crisis, you've got to be in the mix, sleeves rolled up. If you're asking people to sacrifice, you sacrifice first. And this notion of leading by example. And actually, it's a great way to lead. And it's much more exciting that way. And then you have to expect things are going to get messy. It's not. We often think of progressing from, in a plan that we go from A to B to C to D. In fact, it's more like A, B, back up, go forward. So just expect it's going to get messy, and you've got to keep going. And then I have if you read Simon Sinek's book about why, but to keep the right things in order. First it's why, then it's who, then it's how. And you're driven by your mission. So you don't run for the exit because you believe in what your organization does. So the reason it causes so much pain to think you can't have your camps, because you're passionate about the vision and the mission of why your organization exists. Why don't you run away from public health right now? Because the reason you exist is to keep the community safe. So you've got to believe in the mission of what you're doing, because when things get hard, that's what will keep you focused and moving forward. And then who you surround yourself with, it doesn't matter where you're trying to get to or how great the plan is. If you don't have the right people working with you that are all in and are committed, no plan's going to work. And then you can figure out, what are we going to do to get there? You've got to find your inspiration, resilience, so that you've got the grit to keep going. We've already talked about blessed are the flexible, and you've got to love what you do. We lead because we love our teams. got to find a way to keep perspective, and you have to make space to grieve the losses that will occur along the way because they're real and they're painful. Yeah, so those are some of my principles. Yeah.
Those are beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, Katie, you're up next.
Oh, okay.
Guiding principle, true north. What's kind of kept you going?
So I have a couple of organizational ones and then a personal one, but I have been tremendously lucky to have two predecessors that I consider great leaders to me, and Kevin Gibson and Clay Goddard, who have both been the directors of the health department, have poured into me a lot over the past several years. And I know we've all gotten to see the example that Clay gives us, and I've been lucky to have known that example for a long time, but I'm sort of proud that our community now gets to see what I get to be privileged enough to work with on a daily basis. But Kevin and Clay really helped impart a lot of good wisdom over the course of several years. But one of the first things that I learned from them quite some time ago was that you want to always seek to hire people that are smarter than yourself. And so we have an amazing team at our department, and talk about emotional. I can't tell you how proud I am of our department. We have 110 people who are all in. And the response that they have given and that they have poured into our community is completely immeasurable in my mind. It's not easy, the jobs that they're doing. You know, we make a lot of people very frustrated right now, and so they get the brunt of a lot of that. And I am just privileged to be able to work with a lot of people who are very smart, and that came from good wisdom from my leaders. The other thing is that you don't make friends when you need them. And so our department has really worked over the past decade or so to build a lot of relationships throughout the community. And I can tell you, we all love our community dearly, and to have those relationships and the fortunate timing of our ability to connect with those relationships has given us the ability to respond to our community with a collective support that is also immeasurable. And I know that we are in a sort of second wave of things that are amping up right now, but our initial outtake has been tremendous because of the support across sectors that we have received. And then finally, you know, all of that sort of has given perspective on how important my job and my commitment to that is right now. And that's something that has been forced in a lot of ways to really prioritize and figure out what it is that we're going to focus it on. And for me, that has been work and then my kids. And so this has really pressed into focus what are the most important things. And those are two very hard things right now, though, because there's a lot of unknown with my kids that they're asking questions about. And so I struggle with anxiety. I have for years, and I have a tremendous counselor who has taught me about self-care. And I know that's a buzzword, but it is something that if you don't have that understanding of what that really means, I would encourage everybody to really seek that out and find out what that means for you. Because if I had not learned, and I'm not great at it, but if I had not learned some of those principles in the past several years that I've been seeing her name is Deborah Cox, and she is amazing. But those things have carried me through this, and I have been able to let things go and just learn to allow myself grace and rest. And that has been a truly a gift during this time. So those are my few things.
I would just add to that, I mean, I journal every morning, and one of the standard questions that I ask myself is, what am I going to do to take care of me today? You know, and I kind of try to think of that as like, what's the fun thing for me today? And it could be as simple as like, I'm going to paint my nails tonight or whatever. But to know ahead of time, I'm going to carve out a little time for me, and I do think that's very important.
So important.
It's so important. All right, Krystal, what about you?
Well,
True
you guys,
north.
Yeah, you guys have said several that were already on my list, so I'm going to only share a few of them. I too am so fortunate that I get to serve and alongside our phenomenal CEO, John Tulak. If you haven't had the chance to meet him, he's an incredible human being. And so having him in the thick of this has been incredible. Our team at Barnabas, exactly like you said, Carol, they are all in. They love this ministry, and they are there for all the right reasons. So a couple of the 4 that I've tried to focus on over the last several weeks is, number 1, I am a total type A. I love a spreadsheet. I love a planner. And I have learned that I am not in control. And there are so many things. As much as I have plan A, B, C, D, okay, let's move that here. It's not in my control. And so that's super, super hard. So what can I control? And so my huge that goes back to is I can control my attitude. How do I show up every day? Do I have a grateful heart? So what does that look like? And then my response to a situation. I can control those 2 things. My number 2, which I love to please people, I want people to love the ministry of Barnabas. I want them to like me. Well, the reality is when you're in leadership and you're making the decisions that we're making right now, not everyone is going to love you. And that's a hard pill to swallow at times. Number 3, over-communicate, communicate, be transparent, and communicate again. And so I think that that's huge. As much as we kind of are struggling ourselves, I think it's okay to go to our staff and team and say, okay, this is what we're thinking, shoot holes in it. What did we miss? Or what does it look like to our donors? And being super transparent. I just canceled camp, and I've got a $750,000 shortfall. Like, pray with me, be with me. What does this look like? So you cannot over-communicate enough. And for us, I know it's, I used to work for Jack Stack. I had the honor and privilege for years, and he had a motto, cash is king. And so I can sit here confidently today and tell you I was able to make some really hard decisions because I had cash. So it wasn't about, oh my gosh, are we going to survive from a cash standpoint? I can do what's right for our campers and those we serve.
So the next question is really a lot about self-care. So, you know, it has felt like for a lot of people, the weight of the world just feels like it's on your shoulders. You don't have your normal team around you to support you all the time because people are working from home. They're a little bit socially isolated. So about self-care, what are those things that you do to keep yourself motivated so you can continue to motivate your team, your family? Let's go there. And Krystal, I'll just start with you.
Absolutely. So for me, I recognized this early on. I was going to have the COVID-19 real quick, and I was going to be living in my jammies for several weeks. And I recognized, you know what, this is not going to end how I want it to end. So you're exactly right. So for me, it's discipline and morning routine. As much as everyone's like, oh, you're a morning person. That's great. Well, really, I'm not a morning person. I just choose to wake up early because I know that that starts my day off on the right foot. So for me, that means getting up around 5 a.m. I spend quiet time. I read scripture. I pray. You mentioned earlier a gratitude journal is huge. One of my besties got me the 5-minute journal, and it's been a part of my practice for the last 2 years now. I think during a pandemic, it's easy to get caught in the negative and the cycle of what's happening. And so for me, it's finding opportunities to be grateful because there are still amazing things that are happening, and I can choose to have gratitude. And you both mentioned self-care. Exercise is huge. If I get up early, I have quiet time, I pray, I journal, and I work out. That right there are the pillars that just kind of make everything else happen for the rest of the day. I can be a little bit more patient. I can show up as my best self. I can be there for my husband and my kids when I get off work. And I found when I'm not disciplined and I'm not in a routine, I can't do those things. And so for me, during a crisis, that has been like my non-negotiable. That has to happen.
That's great. All right. Katie?
So a few of the same things, but I do think that when this all began, everybody was sort of talking about how they were staying at home, and my life was just the opposite. And so I couldn't quite understand what this boredom was that people were experiencing. And so it was a hard transition, and I quickly alienated all of my and some of them were alienated on my behalf, my coping mechanisms, but I didn't work out, and I was not seeing friends and not, able to see my family, and a lot of different things that are sort of the things that you gravitate towards when you're super stressed. And so this virus has taken away those coping mechanisms in a lot of ways. And so I started running years ago, and I know that runners can sometimes be annoying in the stories that they tell, but I do feel like that, for me, has been one of those things that has helped me the most in coping with my anxiety. And so when I realized that I was eating gummy bears every day at work instead of getting in a run, a friend of mine had sent me Runner's World, and one day I picked it up, and there was this thing about an article about doing a running streak. And so I decided one day I was going to start it. And it talked about how even if you just got 1 mile in per day, that was enough, and you could count that as a day. And the challenge was to do it for 41 days. And so I started that like right after Memorial Day, and I just finished it. And I can tell you, it just gave me back that thing that I needed to sort of stay committed to myself and taking care of myself. And even one of the days that I remember, so I got a new phone recently, and one day I went to pick up food to take to my kids, and I lost it, and then it was stolen. And so that day I was trying to figure out how to get it's like panic, right, when you lose your phone. So I'm at the end of the day trying to figure out how to do that and take care of my kids, and we were at my office trying to use my phone from my desk at like 8:30 p.m., and I got home and I hadn't done my run, and I was so mad that I had to do that, but I did it, and it was like almost like that gift of at least I accomplished one thing that I needed to do for me today. So I would say that you have to stay committed, and I think I've learned that through this process. So it's been a gift in disguise.
Yeah, I would say it's not running for me unless someone's chasing me. I always say that. I've been trying to swim every day, which is why my hair is a little green. But these are the things you do during a pandemic. You got to take some time for yourself. All right, Dr. Taylor, what about you? Your guiding principle, true north, sort of a self-care
Where's
thing.
north?
Where is north? It's
Which way's
moving,
north?
I think.
No.
Yeah.
So I think one of the hardest things when you're in a leadership role and you have all this responsibility, and especially if that role includes caring for others. So there's a reason when you get on a plane, and the instructions that we tend to ignore because we've heard it before and we block it out, but there's a reason that one of those instructions is when they're going through, if there should happen to be a loss of oxygen and the oxygen masks fall down, it's really important that you put your mask on first before you turn to help, your child or traveling companion. And it's not a selfish thing. It's actually because if you don't have a good supply of oxygen, you can't help the one next to you. I sometimes have to remind myself of that because I'm really good telling the team, you got to take a break. In fact, because we've been running full throttle since March, like you. And so about a month ago, I said, look, guys, we're not going to have anything but fumes come August if we don't step away. So I'm asking everyone next week, you've got to block at least a week and get away. And I want it on the calendar. And so until I have an extraordinary admin, I couldn't survive without her. And so then after everyone had she says, and what week am I blocking for you, Carol? Oh, yeah. So it's not a selfish thing. It's actually a loving thing if we take care of ourselves. So other small practical things, because especially if you're working 24/7 and you've got 7 things you've just checked off, and it's a really bad habit. You're shooting emails out at 11:30 at night, and then 6 o'clock Saturday morning, there's another one. There's this wonderful little thing on your calendar that you can have it sent later. So we just set a rule, unless it's emergency, unless someone's dying, a building's on fire, if it can wait until Monday morning, if you need to get it off your to-do list, because that's one of the ways you're going to be able to relax, put the delivery at Monday morning at 7:30. And that works, right? Breathe, take a break. The other is find whatever is life-giving to you, whether it's running, swimming, journaling, you know, developing what is really a spiritual discipline of gratitude at the end. So for me, it's helpful at the end of a really, really rough day to just write, what are the things I'm grateful for today, right? So I have toilet paper at my house. I don't hoard it, but I was never at risk. And I thought, there are people around. I have food in my refrigerator. I have a beautiful home to go home to. I have, at one point it was have heating, now I have air conditioning, I have flowers on my deck, and so find those things that you're grateful for, and then find those things that inspire you. For me, it's often finding that in the stories of other people, sometimes people who aren't well known, who've done extraordinary things. And saying, how did they do that? How did they get through that? And letting their inspiration be yours. And so whether it's in reading biographies, or if you don't have the energy to read a book, you know, you can find wonderful stories about real life stories that are on Netflix or Amazon Prime. But take some time to look at the stories of others who've done extraordinary things and say, you know, there are people who've gotten through impossible situations. For me, one of them was Memorial Day. So at the end of life, my parents shared a home with me. My dad was a World War II veteran, one of 3 sons. All 3 went to war, World War II. And I remember the year my grandfather died, I went and spent the summer with my grandmother so she wouldn't be alone. And as a young adult, it occurred to me, as a child, I didn't think about it, but as a young adult, there was a time when all 3 of your sons were in harm's way. You had 2 in Europe, you had 1 in the Pacific, 1 survived the Battle of the Bulge, 1 did not make it home. And when I was moving from California here, my father had passed away, and I was going to give away his hard side briefcase because we don't use those anymore. I picked it up in the closet, and it was heavy. And I opened it up, and inside this briefcase was just this treasure. It was the uncle I had never met because he was shot down in the war. He flew missions over Italy. But inside this briefcase was his Purple Heart, a couple other medals, and letters that he and my father wrote during World War II. So for me, one of those, let's step out and be reminded of a different time when people did really courageous things and got through it. And I spent the day reading letters that I had never read before of 2 brothers, you know, during the war. So whatever it is, find it, make time, and go there and spend time in that place to get renewed.
I love that you told that story yesterday. You know, you have those moments where you think, I don't have time to read this article someone forwarded me, but then you click in anyway. So I had one of those moments, and it was actually one of our nurses in Northwest Arkansas was featured yesterday in USA Today. She's EVS, Environmental Services, and she cleans the rooms of the COVID patients down there. She's their only contact, most of them, that they really get all day, you know, who has enough time to really have a conversation, so she makes sure to have that conversation. Now, I thought I didn't have the time to read that, but once you do and you think about, that's a really extraordinary thing, it just refreshes you. I was rejuvenated the rest of the afternoon. I'm glad I took the 3 minutes to read that. So you're right, like just stepping back and saying, I'm lucky I have this.
And when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to think. A day will come, right, when we'll look back on this moment. Remember how we got through that? And those are the most inspiring stories, right? It's those cliffhanger moments, like, are you going to survive? Are you not going to survive? And that inspire all of us. And so hang on to the thought that one day, you know, hopefully your children will be inspired by your stories of this time, because there'll be more hard times ahead, because that's life. Right?
That is life.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably end with you, Dr. Taylor, talking to us about what you mean when you say choose love. What do you mean by that?
So actually, I didn't originate that either.
Okay.
So being an academic, we read a lot of books. And so this was, and so I have a collection of books that are also inspiring. But there's a great book by Kouzes and Posner called The Truth About Leadership. And they talk about the 10 truths of leadership. Their very last truth is that leadership is an affair of the heart. And when I read it, it so resonated, right? So what keeps us going? The fact that we genuinely love what we do, the people we serve. And just a couple of comments. I mean, so there some of the comments from that chapter they wrote that love is actually the soul of leadership. Love is what sustains people along an arduous journey in a difficult time. It's the source of a leader's courage, and a reminder that the purpose of leadership is legacy, not to be a legend. And we do more for those we care about and love. So why does it hurt? Because you're not having your camp, because you love these kids, you love these families. It makes a difference in the way you lead. And it's what inspires you every day to get up and keep going. Why do you get up every day, even when you're feeling stressed? Because you love this community. You know, you care about the men and women and children that are part of Springfield and Greene County and Southwest Missouri. You know, how do you go to Mercy every day? And swimming helps, and your hair doesn't look that green.
Oh, good.
But it's because what drives you at the deepest core is this passion and love for those you serve, and that will keep you going when everything else fails.
Ooh, I want you to say that again.
That will keep you going when your hair's not that green.
No, not that part.
Okay.
No, but I think that's really wise. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when you're loving people and you're serving people, that will keep you going.
That's right.
When things really do get tough. Ladies, thank you all so much for being here. We really do appreciate it. You have definitely led with grace during this time, and you've given yourself a little grace too, which is what you said, and I know your teams feel that too. So thank you all very much. We appreciate your time.